How to restore a tube radio, step 3 and 4. Good day and welcome back to Mike's Radio Repair and Restoration. Today we're going to tackle two steps at once, step 3 and step 4. And we're going to do that because I know there are some new people who are just starting out, and there are some intermediate people. People with a little bit of skills might opt to do these two steps together, while the beginners might opt to do them separately, which I would highly recommend. That if you're a little bit unsure or a little bit shaky yet or haven't done many, maybe split these two steps out would be best. So the usual warning, there is dangerous all the way up to lethal voltages present in these radios. So if you're following along at home, you do so at your own risk. And I would advise you to take the necessary steps to protect your safety. So with that in hand, we're going to be covering capacitors and resistors today. So in my previous videos in this series, I posted some links, and I'll post them again down below, about resistors and capacitors and what you really need to see. If you haven't seen them, you're going to need to see them prior to watching what we're going to do here today. So maybe pause this and check the description below, and certainly watch the links I posted for resistors and capacitors, as it will greatly help you with the next following steps. So take a look at those and then come back and restart the video, and away we go. So we're going to begin with just taking a look at the bottom and navigating around the chassis a little bit, seeing what we see. Then we're going to look at the schematic, and we're going to talk about some differences in resistors that we have to be very cautious of. And this is where the resistor video will really come in handy for you. So without further ado, let's flip it over and have a look and talk about what we see. Okay, the underside of our S40B. So, as I was saying, in this step, we're going to deal with all of the wax paper capacitors, and we're going to check all of the resistors one by one. And this is kind of sort of where it's important that you've watched the previous videos that I've put in the description below. But you can see here, this capacitor looks like a domino, and there's another one here, another one here, another one here. These don't need to be changed unless proven otherwise. They seldom fail. They're usually pretty good, so we don't bother with them. We just leave them be until they prove they're a problem. So what we're going after when we're talking about capacitors now is these indeed wax paper guys. And as I've said about 1.2 million times, they leak, they fail. They're known. They're a definite known problem, and every single one of them has to go. We're going to remove them one at a time and put in a modern replacement all the way through. So even there's one way up here that we've got to deal with. So all of them have to go. So doing step 3 and step 4 together, we're going to hit the schematic and talk a little bit about resistors when we look at the schematic. When I'm doing a radio like this, will begin working my way through the set. And as I'm working in one particular area, I'll check the resistors with, of course, the tubes out, because a lot of resistors can be checked by having the tube out of the socket. That means one end of the resistor is connected to nothing. If you've got one end of the resistor connected to nothing, you can get an accurate reading on it. If you've got both ends of the resistor connected to things, you can't really get an accurate reading on it, excuse me. So we'll look at that in the schematic, what that looks like. So I go through, change the capacitor, check the resistors are associated with the base of this tube, and I move on and I do the resistors and capacitors together. For the new folks who haven't done this or have only done it once or twice, I strongly recommend you do the capacitors first. Just take one capacitor out, put a new one in, and go right through the radio. Change just the capacitors one at a time. Don't create a lot of fuss, or lose your train, or where you cut this out or where you cut that out. You can go back and check the resistors later one at a time, and stay focused on the job at hand. A lot of folks start out that way, and that's kind of sort of the way that I've been teaching these years, is you do the capacitors in one step and the resistors in another, but again, the intermediate folks may want to do them together, as I do. So we had discussed in previous videos, don't know if you've seen it or not, you might look at the bottom of one of these and go, wow, that's a rat's nest, or just a great big jumble that I don't understand. One of the best ways to navigate around these chassis, as according to the schematic, is we look at a tube base here, and all of these tube bases, they've got this notch that keys the tube in. And you can go around clockwise. So if this is the notch here, this is pin 1, pin 2, pin 3, pin 4, and so on, clockwise. So you can equate it to the schematic in that very way. It makes it very easy. Once you find that notch, there's a notch there, so you know where pin 1, 2, and so far, and so on is. Sometimes they're labeled. You can see the numbers on the sockets, but sometimes they're so busy you can't, so the easiest way is just to count. It works very well, and again, you can follow up on the schematic. So let's take a look at the schematic, because I want to talk about resistors, and I want to talk about the ones that commonly fail and why they commonly fail. And we're going to show you a few areas where different kind of resistors have to be used rather than the regular modern ones we have. So let's get the schematic fired up and take a look at that. All right, here we're looking at the front end of our S40B, and let's take a few minutes and talk about the resistors. So this is the first RF amp. This is the first tube inbound signal to the radio sees. And right here on the plate, we have a 22 ohm resistor marked as R10. Now it's crystal clear that RF flows through that resistor. Hence, we can't use a modern carbon metal film spiral cut resistor. We know that resistance, inductance, and capacitance forms a tank circuit, and depending upon the value of those three items, determines what frequency that tank circuit oscillates at. So that 22 ohm resistor, if we were to put a spiral cut in there, that spiral cut resistor offers up or adds a little of inductance to the circuit that we don't want. So we would have to replace that 22 ohm resistor with an old-fashioned carbon style resistor, if you can still find them. There are some around. Or you can go, Ohmite has got a new line of resistors out for the last years. It was OX and OY that are best for this, OX and OY class resistors. And they've recently come out with OW, and OWs are half watt resistors, and I think it's OX are 1 watt resistors. You don't quote me on that, but if you look on Mouser, you can find them. They're there. But there's no real big savings in stepping down from 1 watt to a half watt. They seem to be the same price, and they seem to be extremely pricey. So some of these resistors I may test. They may test bad, and I may have to leave them and order them if I don't have them. I know I've got a small stock of OX and OY class resistors, but I'm going to have to improve my stock on this. This radio has a lot more RF-based passing through resistors than my other S40s do. But if you look at this one here, now let's just talk about plate and cathode resistors. These are the ones that are most apt to drift. They set the bias of the tube. They're the workhorses. They do the hard work, and they're ones that are most prone to drift. And here we're blocked off by a capacitor, so I can put a standard metal film resistor in down here, but ones where RF passes directly through, like R10, like R11, and probably even this one, maybe I'd have to follow the circuit down. But if you even remotely think that RF is going to pass through or affect the oscillator or a tuned circuit or an IF transformer in any way, shape, or form, just put a carbon resistor in rather than a metal film. Here's another one here. This R15 is definitely RF passing through it. That has to be an old-fashioned carbon resistor. So we need to keep that in mind as we're going through and we're replacing resistors. Some resistors we can put those new fancy metal film spiral cuts in, power supplies and whatnot, and some places you just can't. Now looking at the schematic, we can see this 2.2 microfarads. Is that really 2.2 picofarads, or puff as we call them? That'll be one of our dominoes that we don't need to replace, but this decoupler 0.05, this will be a standard wax paper cap that we need to replace. Let's just slide down and have a look here now. Now once you get out of RF, this is the second IF amp, this is the last IF transformer, and by the time you get into this stage, you're getting into audio and you're not getting into radio anymore. So all of the resistors on the output side of the detector, certainly down in here, certainly around the audio output tube, can be just regular old-fashioned resistors. So with that in hand, we're going to go back to the bench, and we're going to begin working out a strategy to start replacing capacitors and testing resistors as we go. Okay, so I've got my soldering station in the back warming up. I've got a pair of these type of nipper pliers. I got a hook tool, which is handy for when you can't really reach in and get a hold of one of the new capacitor leads to wrap it around the terminal. I've got a couple of different types of needle nose pliers. I have this is Teflon spaghetti that you put over the leads of the capacitors or resistors. Like, this lead is long. I might, if I replace that resistor, I might have to put Teflon or spaghetti on it here to protect it, like I've done in step 2. So I'm ready with that, and of course I got a great big huge stock of capacitors, so there shouldn't be any problems there. And I think at that point what I'm going to do is I'm probably going to start at this side and work my way over slowly, checking resistors and changing capacitors as I go. So I'll be back. I'll make a few stops along the way and discuss anything that I might have found, and I'll be back in a minute. Okay, a bit of an update here. Things are going pretty well. As you can see, I've got a few done. There are, I believe, 6 left to do in this area here. But you can see these yellow guys here and the black ones make up what I've changed so far. And I've got one a little way over here. I'm not finding much in the way of resistors out of tolerance, other than one so far, and that's this guy here. He's 330 ohms, and his tolerance is 10%, and he measures 365 ohms, so he's like 3 ohms out of tolerance, but he's a one of the ones that has to be a carbon resistor, and I don't have him in stock, so I'll have to order that. But it's all right. It's not great. It's only a little bit over tolerance, but it's enough that I can start the radio safely. So I'm not really worried about it. I can order it and stamp it in when it comes. Everything's always a week, 10 days away to order stuff, so we'll just carry on. But like I say, I'm not finding anything out of the question here, or out of the ordinary, I guess is a better way to say. Everything's been going well and reasonable. Just hang tight. Let me get through this here, and I didn't discuss, I have before in other videos, but I will again in this one, about how to check resistors. We'll go to the schematic to do that. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and put these last 6 caps in and check the resistors around them, and then I will be back. Okay, all of the wax paper capacitors are gone and replaced with modern units. And like I said, I've used some of the Teflon spaghetti where I needed to. And I have another video out there about where I get stuff that you might want to watch. Tony's Capacitor Corner. Good bunch of guys over there. Get a lot of my stuff there, including the Teflon spaghetti and the capacitors you're looking at. So he always works well for me. So I've been through this set with a fine-tooth comb, and I've checked every resistor, and I've done it twice. And I can only find this one that's close to being out of range. And it's the only one that I needed to replace, other than we know we had to do the power resistor on the way in. It was bad. We knew this one almost always goes over here on the audio tube, so that was nothing new. But the fact that I've not had to replace one other single resistor on this is pretty amazing. But it happens sometimes. The S40B is a newer set, so maybe it has better quality resistors than the older sets, but some sets you replace almost every damn one, and others you hardly do anything. So I'll happily take that as a win, but we've updated it here with capacitors. Now, we were going to talk a little bit about, we'll go to the schematic in just a minute, how we check resistors, at least an easy way that you can get that done, or when you're looking at it, how to understand that. So we'll go and look at the schematic now. Okay, so when you check a resistor, like we've got a 22 ohmer here, one end of the resistor has got to be open, meaning not really connected to anything, or at least blocked by a capacitor anyhow, a good capacitor. But when you pull the tube out of the socket, it automatically opens up one end of that 22 so you can clip on and test it. Same, here, you've got the tube out, you're blocked over here by a capacitor, you clip on and you can test it. Same here, you pull that tube out, you clip on either side of that 33 and you can test it, and so on. If you get to a spot where you can't free one end up by pulling a tube, you may have to desolder it and lift one end. That's not unheard of. Sometimes, depending upon how easy or difficult it was to desolder it, if I have to lift one end, I often just replace it, rather than heat soaking the resistor a couple of times with the soldering routine. So that's pretty simple. The resistors are in the set, for the most part, rated at a 10% tolerance. Although when I replace resistors, I don't put 10% in, I put 1%. And if they call for a half watt, I put in a 1 watt. This gives the set some better longevity. And like with all manufacturers, they've got a nice parts list here that tells you what each of the resistors are and what their wattage is. So that's kind of handy. So that's pretty simple and straightforward. Actually, changing the caps and changing the resistors is not a difficult job. Just a little thought, a little forethought, a little care. I'm going to be putting together a video later on soldering techniques for this. One of the things you have to be careful is that when you're soldering on the bottom of these tabs of the tube, some of them are quite brittle and you can break those tabs off. If you've got spare junker radio, sometimes you can swap a tab out of another tube socket and install it, and if not, sometimes you may have to replace the socket. So I use extreme care when I'm working it around those tabs. Just a little word of caution. Okay, so let's head back to the bench now. Okay, so to recap, step one, we did our initial inspection on the radio to make sure that it was restorable. Nothing was broken, nothing was missing. And in step two, we did our power supply, our audio tube, our filter caps and power resistors. Step three was doing the capacitors, and step four was doing the resistors. So at this point, the radio is actually safe to plug in and turn on, which we'll probably be doing in the next episode of this series. But just a word of caution to you: always resist the temptation to plug your radio in until you get it to this point. When you bring it home, you're probably in a hurry to find out whether it works or not. But if it's full of these old wax paper capacitors, like we see here, just don't plug it in. Don't turn it on. Do the inspection. Follow the routine that I've laid out in this series video to ensure your success and safety. Like, you don't want to burn something up in the radio that you can't buy or replace, or or is great difficulty to find another part that gets burned up. Burned up power transformers are not good. Burnt up IF transformers are not a good thing. So anyways, I guess that ends this this video, and we'll see you again in the next one, where we maybe going to get some other things done. I know we got stuff on the top of the chassis to do. We've got to get the IF transformers unstuck. We've got to get the variable tuning capacitor fixed up, cleaned up, and reattached to the chassis properly and on center of the tuning window. So that's got to be done, and the top of the chassis needs to be cleaned up. So all kinds of things need to get done in order for us to proceed and turn this puppy on. So thanks for tuning in. Again, if you have questions, leave them below. This is a fairly straightforward ordeal to do. It's not hard. If you've got some soldering skills and you've done a little bit of electronic work, you should be able to breeze through this. Certainly using my trick of counting from the notch on the tube, and 1, 2, 3, 4. So now you can read the schematic and follow along. Try not to get all upset about the rat's nest, and you can do this, certainly. So until next time, we'll see you again.